He didn't just flee from one Mexican prison. In 2015, El Chapo escaped via this jailhouse trapdoor through an underground tunnel on a motorcycle.
Nano claims that he made money in the more traditional ways, gambling and bootlegging, while Luciano went for the big payday, making his money through narcotics, prostitution, extortion.
What if I told you that some of the most powerful people in history never held political office? They controlled entire cities through fear alone. Stay to the end, and I'll reveal the surprising connection between these criminal masterminds that historians don't want you to know. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button to join our journey through the shadowy corners of history. Let me know in the comments which criminal boss you find most fascinating. Al Capone. In the Roaring Twenties, one name struck fear throughout Chicago: Alphonse Gabriel Capone. At the height of Prohibition, Capone controlled a criminal empire worth an estimated $100 million annually. That's about $1.4 billion in today's money. What made Capone truly dangerous wasn't just his ruthlessness, but his business acumen. He transformed disorganized neighborhood rackets into a sophisticated criminal corporation with tentacles reaching into legitimate businesses, unions, and city government. Capone's organization controlled everything from bootlegging to prostitution, gambling to extortion. At his peak, he employed over 1,000 gunmen and had half of Chicago's police force on his payroll. While many remember the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, where 7 rivals were lined up and executed, what's less known is how Capone manipulated public perception. He opened soup kitchens during the Depression and appeared at charity events, portraying himself as a businessman providing what people wanted during Prohibition. What ultimately brought down this criminal mastermind wasn't murder charges, but tax evasion. After investigators meticulously tracked his lavish spending habits, from custom suits to his famous $50,000 bulletproof Cadillac, Capone was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. His mind deteriorated from untreated syphilis, and the once-feared boss spent his final years fishing in his bathrobe at his Florida mansion, physically and mentally destroyed. Have you ever wondered what happens to a criminal empire when its leader falls? In Capone's case, the organization continued under new management, proving that the systems he built were stronger than the man himself. Now that's true influence. Pablo Escobar. At one point, Pablo Escobar was smuggling 15 tons of cocaine into the United States every day. Let that sink in. The scale of his operation was so massive that he reportedly spent $20,500 monthly just on rubber bands to hold his cash. As head of the Medellin cartel, Escobar controlled an estimated 80% of the global cocaine trade at his peak, an operation that brought in around $420 million weekly. What made Escobar uniquely dangerous was his strategic approach to power. In Colombia, he positioned himself as a Robin Hood figure, building housing projects, soccer fields, and hospitals in poor neighborhoods. This created a human shield of loyalty among locals who would warn him of approaching authorities. Meanwhile, he enforced his will through a simple philosophy: plata o plomo, silver or lead. Take the bribe or take the bullet. Escobar's influence extended far beyond the drug trade. He was elected as an alternate member of Colombia's Congress. He assassinated presidential candidates, bombed a commercial airliner killing 107 people, and orchestrated the takeover of Colombia's Palace of Justice that left half the Supreme Court dead. At one point, he offered to pay Colombia's national debt, estimated at $10 billion, in exchange for immunity. What many don't realize is that Escobar essentially built his own luxury prison. When authorities finally closed in, he negotiated his surrender, but only to a prison he designed himself, La Catedral, complete with a football field, bar, and jacuzzi. His eventual death on a Medellin rooftop in 1993 sparked mixed reactions. While many celebrated, thousands of poor Colombians attended his funeral, mourning the man they saw as their protector. Do you think anyone could accumulate that kind of power in today's interconnected, surveillance-heavy world? I'm curious what you think. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. What would you do with a personal fortune estimated at $14 billion? For Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, it bought tunnels, submarines, aircraft, and an army that made him Mexico's most powerful criminal boss. As head of the Sinaloa cartel, El Chapo revolutionized drug trafficking through innovation, constructing sophisticated tunnels beneath the U.S.-Mexico border equipped with lighting, ventilation, and even rail systems to move drugs efficiently. El Chapo's influence was so extensive that it transcended typical territorial boundaries. Unlike bosses who controlled single cities, his organization operated in over 50 countries. At its peak, the Sinaloa cartel smuggled more narcotics into the United States than any other organization in history. An estimated 25% of all illegal drugs entering the U.S. came through his network. What made El Chapo truly legendary wasn't just his criminal empire, but his ability to escape capture. He engineered two spectacular prison breaks. One in 2001 when he allegedly escaped in a laundry cart, and more famously in 2015 when he disappeared through a mile-long tunnel dug directly under his prison cell shower, equipped with a motorcycle on rails. This escape embarrassed the Mexican government and enhanced his mythological status among supporters. The human cost of El Chapo's reign was staggering. His organization was responsible for an estimated 34,000 murders during Mexico's drug war. El Chapo finally met his match in 2017 when he was extradited to the United States and sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years. Lucky Luciano Charles. Lucky Luciano revolutionized organized crime in ways that still shape our world today. Born in Sicily, Luciano transformed the chaotic territorial nature of American crime families into what historians now call organized crime. Before Luciano, mob bosses fought bloody turf wars that attracted law enforcement attention. Luciano's genius? Creating a national crime syndicate, essentially a board of directors for the underworld. What made Luciano particularly influential was his business approach to crime. He eliminated the old Mustache Pete generation of bosses who clung to outdated Sicilian traditions and embraced modern American capitalism. He diversified beyond the traditional protection rackets into labor unions, loan sharking, prostitution, and gambling. His organizational innovation, creating the Commission, allowed crime families to settle disputes without street warfare, minimizing police scrutiny. Luciano's power was so extensive that during World War II, the U.S. government secretly worked with him to secure New York waterfront against Nazi sabotage. Naval intelligence officers coordinated with Luciano, who was serving a 50-year sentence, to activate his network of dock workers and sailors as informants. This cooperation eventually led to his sentence being commuted, though he was deported to Italy. Even from exile, Luciano influenced global crime. He helped establish international drug trafficking routes between Asia, Europe, and North America. The criminal framework he designed, separating bosses from street-level crimes through buffer layers of management, became the template for criminal organizations worldwide. Modern RICO laws targeting organizational crime were created specifically to dismantle the structures Luciano pioneered. Did you know that without Luciano, Las Vegas might never have become the gambling capital we know today? His vision and financing helped transform a desert town into a criminal money-making machine. Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the Lord of the Skies. Imagine controlling a fleet of aircraft so vast that you earn the nickname Lord of the Skies. That was the reality for Amado Carrillo Fuentes, who revolutionized drug trafficking by using private aircraft to move cocaine from Colombia to Mexico for distribution into the United States. At his peak, Carrillo Fuentes operated a fleet of over 30 Boeing 727 jets, each capable of carrying up to 10 tons of cocaine per flight. What made Carrillo Fuentes particularly dangerous was his combination of logistics expertise and ruthless violence. As leader of the Juarez cartel, he modernized drug trafficking operations through sophisticated transportation networks while eliminating rivals through calculated assassinations. Unlike flamboyant bosses who attracted attention, Carrillo Fuentes operated more like a CEO, delegating violence while focusing on business expansion and political protection. The scale of his operation was unprecedented. Mexican authorities estimate that during the height of his power in the mid-1990s, Carrillo Fuentes moved approximately 200 tons of cocaine annually into the United States, generating over $25 billion in sales. This massive cash flow allowed him to corrupt officials at every level of government. According to some reports, his monthly bribe budget exceeded $500 million, reaching into the highest levels of Mexican law enforcement and politics. Carrillo Fuentes met an ironic end in 1997. While undergoing extensive plastic surgery to alter his appearance and evade capture, he died on the operating table, either from surgical complications or, as some suspect, assassination. His funeral featured solid gold coffins and attracted thousands of mourners, demonstrating the complex relationship between criminal bosses and the communities they simultaneously terrorize and economically support. Yakuza boss Yoshio Kodama. Behind Japan's orderly facade operated one of history's most politically influential criminal bosses. Yoshio Kodama wasn't just a Yakuza leader, he was a shadow power broker whose influence shaped post-war Japan. What made Kodama unique was his transformation from ultranationalist to America's unlikely Cold War ally, demonstrating how criminal bosses sometimes operate with tacit government approval when politically convenient. During World War II, Kodama amassed a fortune pillaging occupied China of industrial resources for Japan. After Japan's defeat, he faced potential war crimes charges, but struck a deal with American intelligence. In exchange for freedom, he mobilized his criminal network against communist influences in Japan. Using Yakuza muscle, he broke strikes, intimidated leftist politicians, and helped establish the conservative political dominance that would characterize Japan for decades. Kodama's power reached its peak during Japan's economic miracle years. He controlled construction contracts, entertainment industries, and international shipping through a complex network of legitimate companies with Yakuza connections. His most infamous operation was the Lockheed bribery scandal of the 1970s, where he served as the middleman in a scheme that saw Lockheed aircraft pay millions in bribes to Japanese officials to secure military contracts. When exposed, the scandal brought down Japan's prime minister and revealed the corrupt intersection of politics, business, and organized crime. What many don't realize is how Kodama leveraged legitimate business operations alongside illegal activities. He established shipping companies, construction firms, and entertainment enterprises that operated legally while facilitating broader criminal operations. This blueprint, using legitimate businesses as both money laundering vehicles and operational cover, became standard practice for sophisticated crime organizations worldwide. Griselda Blanco, the Black Widow. While male bosses dominated criminal headlines, Griselda Blanco built a cocaine empire so brutal that even hardened mobsters feared her. Known as the Black Widow, or the Godmother, Blanco revolutionized cocaine distribution in the United States during the 1970s and early 1980s, particularly in Miami, where her operations sparked the infamous Cocaine Cowboys era of unprecedented violence. What made Blanco exceptionally dangerous was her innovation in both business and brutality. She pioneered the use of female couriers with custom-made lingerie equipped with hidden compartments for cocaine smuggling, an approach that initially evaded traditional law enforcement profiles focused on male traffickers. Once established in Miami, she created mobile assassination teams that used motorcycles for quick hits, a tactic later used against her in her own assassination. The scale of Blanco's operation was staggering. At her peak, she moved approximately 300 kilograms of cocaine monthly into the United States, generating over $80 million monthly. She maintained relationships with Colombian suppliers while controlling distribution networks across Florida, New York, and California. Law enforcement attributes between 40 to 250 murders directly to her orders, including the infamous shopping mall shooting that left a 2-year-old child dead. An act of brutality shocking even by Miami's violent standards during that era. What separated Blanco from other bosses was her personal involvement in violence. Unlike male counterparts who typically delegated assassinations, Blanco allegedly committed her first murder at age 11 and personally participated in executions throughout her career. Khun Sa, the Opium King. In the dense jungles of the Golden Triangle, Khun Sa built a heroin empire so powerful that he essentially operated as an independent state within Southeast Asia. At his peak, his Shan United Army controlled territories spanning parts of Myanmar, Burma, Laos, and Thailand, complete with his own schools, hospitals, and administrative systems in areas beyond government control. What made Khun Sa uniquely dangerous was his combination of drug trafficking expertise, military capability, and political ambition. Unlike urban crime bosses, he commanded a well-equipped army of over 20,000 soldiers who protected vast opium poppy fields and heroin refineries. His operation produced an estimated 70% of the heroin reaching American streets during the 1980s and early 1990s, causing addiction and death in communities thousands of miles from his jungle headquarters. The scale of his operation was immense. At its height, Khun Sa's network cultivated approximately 160,000 acres of opium poppies, producing over 250 tons of opium annually. This translated to roughly 25 tons of refined heroin worth billions on American streets. The profits funded sophisticated weaponry, political bribes, and infrastructure in regions he controlled, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of power that traditional law enforcement approaches couldn't penetrate. What many don't realize about Khun Sa was his political complexity. He positioned himself as a freedom fighter for the ethnic Shan people, claiming drug profits funded their struggle for independence from Myanmar's military government. This political dimension complicated enforcement efforts, as some local populations viewed him as a protector rather than a criminal. He even once offered to sell his entire opium crop to the U.S. government for $100 million in what he framed as a crop substitution program, an offer that was rejected. Khun Sa's eventual surrender to Myanmar authorities in 1996 came with remarkable terms: immunity from prosecution, protection of his assets, and relocation to the capital, where he lived openly as a legitimate businessman until his death in 2007. This transformation from warlord to protected business figure reveals how some criminal bosses successfully navigate political channels to secure their legacy and wealth. Frank Lucas, the country boy. What happens when you cut out the middleman in the drug trade? Frank Lucas answered this question by creating one of the most profitable heroin operations in American history. Unlike other criminal bosses who worked through established channels, Lucas traveled directly to Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War, arranging to purchase heroin directly from producers in the Golden Triangle and smuggling it back to the United States in the coffins of dead American servicemen. What made Lucas particularly dangerous was his business ingenuity combined with ruthless enforcement. By eliminating traditional mafia middlemen, Lucas sourced heroin that was both higher in purity. His infamous Blue Magic brand was 98% pure compared to the typical 5–10% street product, and lower in cost. This disrupted existing power structures while creating devastating addiction in New York's Harlem neighborhood, where Lucas concentrated distribution. Lucas eventually faced justice, receiving a 70-year sentence that was reduced after he cooperated with authorities. Upon release, he claimed to regret the devastation his heroin business caused in black communities. His story gained widespread attention through the film American Gangster, though Lucas himself claimed the movie exaggerated many aspects of his life. I have to ask, does Lucas's direct sourcing approach remind you of how modern businesses try to eliminate middlemen to increase profits? The parallel between criminal innovation and business disruption is eerily similar in some respects. I hope this exploration has provided insight into this shadowy corner of human history. If you found this fascinating, hit subscribe for more deep dives into history's most influential figures. Until next time, stay curious.